We begin with major breaking news that US President Joe Biden has formally announced that he's withdrawing from the US presidential election. In a statement that was shared on his social media channels a little earlier from his COVID isolation, he said he believed it's in the best interest of his party. Our Washington correspondent Annelise Nielsen joins us live now from Washington, D.C. So, Annelise, this breaking news has been going for a little over an hour's time now. So, I mean, it was a few hours before that he was digging his heels in. So what happened? What changed?
Well, look, the sense was that the campaign had to be fully in until they were out, and this momentum was building for some time. As much as we've been looking at the machinations of members of Congress joining calls to quit, about protests, really at the end of the day, once you've lost the donors, you've lost the race, and it became just completely untenable. Even with $250 million locked in the Biden-Harris campaign, they were losing more in prospective donations that they were relying on to keep that momentum up. So it just became something of a foregone conclusion, as much as this is just an extraordinary moment in history. We understand this is the latest that any candidate has pulled out of a US presidential campaign as the presidential candidate in history. So Joe Biden made this announcement somewhat discreetly by just posting it to social media channels as a letter. We can read that full letter for you now. It says, "My fellow Americans, over the past 3.5 years, we have made great progress as a nation. Today, America has the strongest economy in the world. We've made historic investments in rebuilding our nation, in lowering prescription drug costs for seniors, and in expanding affordable health care to a record number of Americans. We've provided critically needed care to 1 million veterans exposed to toxic substances, passed the first gun safety law in 30 years, appointed the first African-American woman to the Supreme Court, and passed the most significant climate legislation in the history of the world. America has never been better positioned to lead than we are today. I know none of this could have been done without you, the American people. Together, we overcame a once-in-a-century pandemic and the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. We've protected and preserved our democracy, and we've revitalized and strengthened our alliances around the world. It has been the greatest honor of my life to serve as your president, and while it has been my intention to seek re-election, I believe it is in the best interests of my party and the country for me to stand down and to focus solely on fulfilling my duties as president for the remainder of my term. I will speak to the nation later this week in more detail about my decision. For now, let me express my deepest gratitude to all those who have worked so hard to see me re-elected. I want to thank Vice President Kamala Harris for being an extraordinary partner in all this work. And let me express my heartfelt appreciation for the American people, for the faith and trust you've placed in me. I believe that today, what I always have, that there is nothing America can't do when we do it together. We just have to remember we are in the United States of America." Now, the first read of that, everyone said the same thing. No endorsement for Kamala Harris. And it only took a few moments for then the Biden account to then post that formal endorsement of Kamala Harris, saying, "My fellow Democrats, I've decided not to accept the nomination and to focus all my energies on my duties as president for the remainder of my term. My very first decision as the party nominee in 2020 was to pick Kamala Harris as my vice president, and it's been the best decision I've made. Today, I want to offer my full support and endorsement for Kamala Harris to be the nominee of our party this year. Democrats, it's time to come together and beat Trump. Let's do this." Of course, it didn't take long for Donald Trump to respond himself. He's posted on Truth Social, "Crooked Joe Biden was not fit to run for president and is certainly not fit to serve and never was. He only attained the position of president by lies, fake news, and not leaving his basement. All those around him, including his doctor and the media, knew that he wasn't capable of being president, and he wasn't. And now look what he's done to our country with totally unchecked and unvetted, many from prisons, mental institutions, and record numbers of terrorists. We will suffer greatly because of his presidency, but we will remedy the great damage he has done very quickly. Make America great again." Now, the walls were closing in on Joe Biden for quite some time since his disastrous appearance at the presidential debate just 24 days ago. What we've seen is a number of Democrats come out and say that he needs to pass the torch. We had Joe Manchin, former Democrat, now independent senator, but very influential, especially in the Senate, which tends to be more bipartisan, that he came out today and said he also thought Joe Biden needed to go.
I came to the decision with a heavy heart that I think it's time to pass the torch to a new generation. I believe that he has a chance, an opportunity to finish the 5 months of his presidency with the way he has always basically overseeing his office, whether it be as senator or as president, wanting to be that uniter, bringing us together, being able to bring peace to the Middle East, being able to support Ukraine in their fight for freedom, and also being able to show the whole world have a transfer of power.
Just on that point that you made, Annelise, I found it really interesting, actually. So you had that original letter that was published or written by Joe Biden or his team that had no endorsement of Kamala Harris. It mentioned her by name, like you pointed out, but there was no endorsement. Then that was quickly followed up by a tweet that gave a full-throttled endorsement of Kamala Harris. Do we read between the lines of what might have happened there?
Look, I wouldn't necessarily. I could be wrong, but it seems like this has been in train for some time of them trying to figure out how to handle this. There's no blueprint for this whatsoever. There's no formula for how to do it. And this has been the big thing holding Democrats back from making any change, is saying, well, Kamala Harris doesn't tend to fare any better in the polls. And so it's better the devil we know than the devil we don't. And so what I would just read from that is that this was done tangentially, at least, even if not at the same time, very quickly afterwards. It didn't take a day of haranguing for it. But the thing to remember in all this is just because Joe Biden gives Kamala Harris his blessing doesn't mean anything at the convention. All those delegates have the right to vote for whoever they like. In the Democrat Party, the rules are that they are pledged, but there is a conscience exemption. So they could have voted for whoever they liked, and they were facing the prospect of having a protest vote against Joe Biden over his handling of Israel-Gaza. The left of his party is very pro-Gaza. They're frustrated that he's continued to support Israel. And so I would bet good money that right now Kamala Harris is working the phones, not trying to find a VP for the ticket, but whipping the delegate votes, because that's who she needs on her side. She needs those big delegations at the convention to be coming out and saying, we will vote for her. And there's any chance we could see others come out of the woodworks now to throw their hat in the ring. I bet money Elizabeth Warren is thinking about potentially this could be her last shot. So why not throw your hat in the ring and try and see if you can make any headway? And this is why it's going to get very messy in the next few weeks.
What about, and you could even, you had Bernie Sanders and AOC and all these guys who had thrown their support behind Biden in recent days. What do they do now?
Look, I don't think it would really be held against them any more than the people who are critical of them for not acknowledging that Biden was having cognitive issues for quite some time before this. The rank and file of the party are frustrated because they keep getting told that 14 million of them supported Joe Biden in the primaries when they weren't allowed to vote for any other candidates. And so it's kind of a Russia-style election if you only have one candidate and tell everyone about how much support they got from it. That's the frustration at the base level, saying we should have been given choices when they knew he wasn't up for another 4 years a while ago, and we feel lied to about it. So that's going to be the hard yards getting the trust back. And I tell you what, I've been hanging out with a lot of Republicans in the last week, and this is the first time in a long time the mess has been on the other side of the aisle, and they're pretty happy about watching this all go down. And they're feeling very confident about. We've got some polls here about where the Kamala Harris campaign compares to Trump, and it's neck and neck in this. So this is from a Marist poll published by NPR, so definitely not on the right side of things. And Harris receives support from 50% of registered voters to 49% for Trump. If you put in some of that frustration that they're going to have from their own supporters saying, I don't want to go support these guys, they're a mess, I'm over this, I can't be bothered voting. It's going to get a lot worse, and it's going to get a lot worse in those swing states. No,
that's true also, and we've got an idea, and we saw JD Vance already do this last week, and Speaker Johnson has already mentioned something along these lines this morning as well, that they don't want to wait until November, right? That their argument is that Joe Biden, he's not fit to be president now. That's going to be the Republican pitch for the next little bit, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And it's going to be a hard one for them to tackle because there is this lingering issue of is he cognitively fit? He won't take a cognitive test. He says he doesn't need to, that every day in the Oval Office is a test of his cognitive ability. And then day by day, he makes more and more mistakes. And it's a real issue when we're talking about how America is perceived on the global stage, when they're talking about the risk of another foreign power trying to take advantage of America, looking like it's in a position of weakness. And Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, has already come out and said this in a statement as well today, that he wants, sorry, I haven't got it handy, but he says he wants to have a proper test of this. And if he's not fit to stand, he should step aside. And then that's a really tough one for Kamala Harris, because then she gets 4 months of governing before an election, and any single thing that goes wrong in that time, it's all on her and her election campaign. And the Harris supporters I've spoken to in DC, they say they feel like she was given a really unfair hand, that she shouldn't have been given the border because it was always going to be a disaster, and that she was set up to fail by the Biden administration. Of course, many on the other side don't agree with that, but that's what they tell me in DC. So that they have to kind of play against that too. And they don't want to look like they're sticking the person of colour and the woman with the bad situation, and they can't jump over her either. So this is the calculations they're playing with.
Well, I mean, I mean, I know this has been said in recent days as well, Annelise, and we've spoken about this too. I mean, might these ambitious presidential hopefuls in years to come look at this situation, look at this picture now in 2024 and think, I don't want to be associated with a losing team here. I'm going to keep my powder dry and run again in 2028. Do you think that's a live situation here for a lot of these other types like Newsom and Whitmer and some of the others as well?
Oh, absolutely. I think our colleague James Morrow was very on the front foot saying that, and I don't think he's wrong at all. I think that's absolutely a calculation the ambitious types would make. And when you look at some of the other Democrat prospects in this mix, I think we've got some graphics here we can show people of the other names that are going to be in this. But Gavin Newsom could be potentially tricky because he's resident in California. Now, he wouldn't want to be Kamala Harris's number two. He'd consider himself too much of a star to be coming in number two. And then the other issue is that in the US Constitution, you risk, if you have two candidates from the same state, invalidating the Electoral College votes of those two candidates. Now, this shouldn't technically be a problem because Kamala Harris should be resident now of Washington, D.C., now that she lives at the Naval Observatory here. But what you are doing is opening the prospect of a legal challenge. It can get messy, it can get expensive, and it might just not be worth everyone's time and stress. Gretchen Whitmer is seen as a very popular choice, but again, she's got mileage on her own. If you talked about a theoretical, completely clean slate, kick Kamala out, if you get Gretchen Whitmer and Josh Shapiro from Pennsylvania, you've locked up two of the biggest swing states, really, unless they mess something up before then. So that could be a really powerful ticket as well. They're talking theoretically about Gretchen Whitmer, Kamala Harris. We could have a double header, two women on the ticket, which would be absolutely historic. But it's just a tough calculation for anyone who does have any kind of mileage. J.B. Pritzker maybe, but he's also got some real problems in Illinois. And like when you're running as a governor, you have to say, I ran the state well. So Nikki Haley had that behind her and it still didn't get her any good mileage. So this is the tough calculation.
Okay. Hey, Annelise, while we've been speaking, and this is interesting too, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., so he's going to be giving a press conference at 5 p.m. today Eastern. That's your time, so that's about 7 a.m. our time. What do we read into that? What's he likely to say here? What's the significance of him at the moment with all of this?
So he's really interesting because he's bleeding votes from both sides. We've seen Donald Trump courting John F. Kennedy in the last week for his endorsement. There was that phone call leaked where we heard Donald Trump saying a lot of anti-vax stuff to try and court favour with JFK Jr. because we know that that's RFK Jr. Because we know that's a big topic for him. But for Democrats as well, where they feel like they're not being given a real option, where they feel like the establishment's telling them who they have to support, he becomes an enticing third option just to kind of vote against the norm. So there is any chance that he could pick up 10% of the vote. That's enough to kill both campaigns and really get this down to the wire in some important swing states. So he's obviously taking the chance here. I'd be shocked if he was at all suggesting a double ticket, but that would be a bit of a nightmare scenario for the Trump campaign as well. But I think at this point in time, if anyone tells you they know what's going to happen, they're lying, because I don't think the Democrats know what's happening. They're doing this day by day as well. So, all right. And we are dealing with unprecedented times, as we often say.
We sure are. Yeah. Also, while you've been speaking, and I know we just spoke about Bernie Sanders. Well, he's just published a statement on X. Said a short time ago, Annelise, going to send a few tweet reactions. He's going to say, Joe Biden has served our country with honour and dignity. As the first president to ever walk on a picket line with striking workers, he's been the most pro-working class president in modern American history. Thank you, Mr. President, for all you've done. As we were just saying with Annelise, Bernie Sanders was well and truly in the Joe Biden camp, even suggesting that they shouldn't drop out in recent days, along with AOC, some of his strongest public supporters. Al Gore, he's said a short time ago, I know that he is not done delivering for the American people and will continue to serve this nation with wisdom and dignity in the coming months. In paving the way for a new generation of leadership, President Biden's decision is a fitting testament to his profoundly consequential career. So that's just some of the statements that have come in just the past couple of moments. Annelise, appreciate that. Thank you. I'll let you catch your breath there for a moment.